China is warning it will respond forcefully if U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi proceeds with a planned visit to Taiwan. Beijing objects to all official contact between Taipei and Washington, but this time the stakes appear to be higher. Meanwhile, Taiwan's capital is staging air raid drills, and its military is mobilizing for routine exercises in response to China's threats. Ms. Pelosi has not confirmed when or even if she'll visit, but U.S. President Joe Biden last week told reporters that American military officials believed such a trip was not a good idea. Well, with us now is Mr. Bradley Bowman, Senior Director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mr. Bowman, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So from the sounds of this, there are a lot of risks associated with this visit, Mr. Bowman. So what is the strategic significance of this visit for the United States in particular, if it were to go through?
The strategic significance is that Beijing wants to extinguish democracy in Taiwan. And as part of the process to do that, it wants to isolate Taipei as much as possible politically and diplomatically. And so that's one of the reasons why I, for one, have long thought that it's wise for members of Congress to go to Taiwan to say that we stand with the free people there as they seek to defend their freedoms. And we've seen what happened already to freedom in Hong Kong. And so if you have the Speaker of the House of Representatives, second in line to the president, visiting Taiwan, that's a very significant thing from both the Taiwanese perspective and from the perspective of the Chinese Communist Party. And, in the past, Beijing would complain, they'd issue harshly worded diplomatic communiques, but now they have the military power to potentially back it up. And that's what makes this a little bit more concerning.
And on that point, what do you think China means when it said it would respond forcefully? What would that look like for both the United States and Taiwan?
I think they're being deliberately vague, as is often the case and when one's making threats, because the one issuing the threat doesn't want to constrain themselves. They want to leave their options open. But the goal is to instill fear. And the question is whether the United States and Speaker Pelosi will back down. At this point, I would say, if she didn't go, that would send a horrible precedent that Beijing, more directly the Chinese Communist Party, has a veto over who visits Taiwan. And I think that would be very unfortunate.
And in addition to the threats from China, we also mentioned Joe Biden's remarks about it not being a good idea, according to military officials. So how likely is Ms. Pelosi to visit Taiwan here?
I, as someone who used to work in the Senate and traveled on staff delegations and organized trips for members of Congress and traveled with them on some of those, they're getting briefings from the Department of Defense. They're getting briefings from our intelligence community. Speaker Pelosi and her team are going to have all the information they need to make this decision. But the bottom line, if she goes, is it's going to be the job of the U.S. government to protect her, and it would be very unwise for Beijing to challenge this approach. But this really is becoming quite a high stakes test of will and perhaps a test of strength. And I hope it doesn't come to that. But, we've seen what happens arguably in Ukraine when we allow bullies to have their way. And I think Beijing is trying to bully us, and we shouldn't let them.
So we mentioned what Joe Biden said, but how are other lawmakers in Washington responding to this potential visit?
It's interesting. Things are so partisan and sadly tribalistic at times these days in Washington, D.C. But here's an instance where you have a lot of Republicans, almost all Republicans, coming out in support of Speaker Pelosi, the leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. The reaction among Democrats is a little bit more mixed, but you have people like Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith, supporting her and her desire to go there. So I'd say generally strong support for her right to go and for her going, particularly among Republicans, but generally also among Democrats as well.
All right, Mr. Bowman, just about a minute left here, but what are you watching for if this visit were to go ahead?
I think the thing for Americans, Canadians, and others to watch here is that the balance of power in East Asia has eroded. And, 10, 20 years ago, it's like we all kind of knew that Beijing wouldn't mess with the United States. That has changed now. And that's why it's more important than ever that we work with our allies to restore deterrence so that Beijing continues to issue strong communiques, but doesn't back it up with military force. But if we allow this erosion to continue, the day may come where it'll be more than words that we see in an instance like this.
Lots to keep our eyes on. Mr. Bowman from FDD, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you.